No, no buzz. Just Bees Book Club. A few months ago, I finished Jon Fosse's Septology, a book that I didn't think I wanted to read. That I think I didn't want to read really. That I have sat on as I recorded other things because I basically spent 2 weeks just sort of slowly devouring it, and those 2 weeks felt like being in a trance, I guess, like meditating, maybe a thing I'm not super familiar with. Never really even tried to do it before, but that metaphors. But I was in the rhythm of Fosse's language the entire time. Um, and thinking about it today, again, some few months after reading it, after finishing it, I think it is. I I think it is an aesthetic experience on par with Proust, and I think that might be those two for me. Um, I'm saying I think Septology is one of the most remarkable books I've ever read, and I'm annoyed because the only reason I heard of him is because of the fucking Pulitzer, sorry, the Nobel, whatever. I don't actively avoid reading big award winners, but like I don't seek them out. And I think it's been documented over the course of this channel, but like I got Trilogy and really dug it. A Shining, I have more mixed feelings about, and then I read his Nobel acceptance speech and thought it was like interesting. But I think one of the things that happened was I read this right, I think immediately after reading Naomi Klein's Doppelganger, or sort of like almost simultaneously with it. And I think that this book made me like Naomi Klein's Doppelganger probably more than I would have, because that book, in retrospect, I'm like, it was good. I sort of stand by what I thought about it, but I think it was greatly helped by its immediate proximity to uh, another book that is heavily involved in thinking the doppelganger, or in aestheticizing the doppelganger. The phrase "I think" might be the most common phrase in this book. Maybe, yeah, let's say phrase. It's probably the most common single phrase in the book. Um, and the protagonist Asla certainly is in his head a lot, but I don't know that you can claim that this book thinks a problem in the same way that I feel like a lot of other things do, because it is so focused on the language. It is so focused on its own musicality and the way it fits together and flows. I was poking around and I saw a brief, I think maybe a Booker Prize video interview with Fosse, where he mentions that he says something along the lines of like, I don't get inspired by things outside. All my inspiration comes from the act of writing, which I think is like uh, like literally every author who ever says anything about their own work is a load of horse shit, but also, as sometimes happens, I think is also very true, because you can feel, especially in this book, like A Shining feels like I could see the truth of that, but it's also very clearly a working through of an allegorical relationship with the mysteries, with Catholic, with Catholic mysteries, let's say. Whereas this depicts so many things, and I think it does some of them extraordinarily. Like, when I finished the book, I decided that the thing I was going to do was sort of pitch this book against how it is pitched, and I've clearly failed to do that. But I wrote this little thing, and I want to read it for posterity because I'm at the end of this notebook, so it'll disappear at some point. Whereas YouTube lasts forever. So my 3-sentence summary of Septology from right around when I finished it. Asla, an aging painter who speaks regularly with his dead wife, drives back into town to find his doppelganger face down in the snow suffering from the DTs. While the Asla who never converted to Catholicism and got dry shakes in his hospital bed, the painter contemplates his latest work over the course of 1 day per book, parenthetical, although there is a time jump, and parenthetical, ending each day in litany. Also, it's a sentence. That parenthetical, I'm very convinced that I knew what I was talking about there being a time jump. I've seen this book described as a single week. I remember seeing that and being like, that's not true, because I think there's a time jump between book 4 and 5, or 5 and 6, or 6 and 7, something like that. Flipping through it now, 3 months later, I didn't immediately come across that in this giant sentence, so I can't point to any direct proof of that, and I haven't looked into it any more than that, but that was the impression I had upon finishing the book, that it is not, in fact, 1 week, it is a week's worth of days, for sure, but that there is a bit of a jump. I think because it's not quite Advent, it's a couple days before Advent when the book starts, and then it's Christmas Eve in the last book, basically, and I think there's there's maybe a 4-day jump or something like that, 5-day jump. Anyway, I have this vague memory of that, but the thing is, you can tell even from that, the first sentence I wrote, the Asla is an aging painter who speaks regularly with his dead wife, drives back into town to find his doppelganger face down in the snow, with the shakes. My sort of premise there was I wonder if you could pitch this as a Norwegian mystery, and you kind of can. As with all pitches, it's reductive, and as with all bad pitches, it leads you to believe you're going to get something you're not going to get. Well, that's sometimes that's actually the best kind of pitch, if you're interested in the selling of the thing and not the experience of it. But yeah, there are so many things about this. I purchased this book. That happens twice a year. I read through it and I was I could return this and put it back on the shelf as a new book because I'm very careful with my books, but I think I want to have this thing around to look at. And this morning proved that true when I was I'm going to go flip through and just sort of see if I could find some passages that I remember, and then I accidentally read 50 pages of the thing, just because the rhythm of the language is so it's perfect for my brain, is the truly objective thing I can say about this. It is, it is a book that is pitched as a sentence, and I think that's one of those things that is actually a very useful. It's incorrect, even though it's accurate in a pitch form, because when I started reading, I had read Trilogy before, and that is not quite one sentence, but it's very long sentences, so with a sort of similar rhythm, but that one is much more about, I think, at least for me, sort of uncovering what is happening between the lines of the novel, what is happening, not between the lines, but in the actual world of the novel, that the long circuitous thought processes of the main character, I believe also named Asla, are intentionally sort of abstracting away, whereas this, in many ways, I think this is pure surface. I think this is the neuromancer of Nobel Prize winning Norwegian literature. Cyberpunks were famous for arguing that it was pure surface, that the in postmodern, and then the postmodernists more generally, that it was pure surface, that it was all interplay between signs, that there was a sort of vacuity where depth used to be assumed. Obviously, Fosse like is reckoning very deeply with things like Catholicism. There's an early passage where he gets into an argument in his own head about baptism that is like, I thought, very funny, but I could see it being very annoying. But like, he is looking, Asla is looking for the depth of things, but I think aesthetically, Septology is about it is one massive surface, and that surface is a single sentence, but that single sentence is not the thing. Not to go back to the postmoderns, but like, when I think of long sentences, obviously I think of Proust, but more recently you think of, I mean, people bring up that it's not the Emily Danforth, the Ducks Newburyport, the Lucy Ellman book. I didn't know that was a single sentence book until I was reading this, and a coworker brought it up to me. And I was like, but it's not what like you think of when you think of a single sentence, because at least when I do, I immediately assume a sort of paranoid stream of consciousness, right? Like a single sentence is a single sentence because you are so embedded in this like moment of revelation or paranoia that there can be no pause. Septology is all pause and reflect, and I think this is like one of the things I'm saying about the musicality of it, or the way it's perfect for my brain. It doesn't stop, but it also doesn't accelerate necessarily. It's sort of on a regular pace all the way through, and there's like rising and falling action and moments. There are images and scenes and tricks of perspective that are all like really interesting aesthetic maneuvers. But there is a calm to this book that seemed to me, when I heard it described as one of those single sentence novels, to be the opposite affect of what those sort of require, which is, Pynchonesque, right? Like it is even Proustian, right? But like with Proust, it's not a paranoia, it's an anxiety, right? His longest sentences are aesthetically driven, but also underpinned with a sense that something is going to be lost if this thing can't be described correctly. I think that's right. In Septology, I never had that sense. I had the sense that this was, and the other thing about it, right, is I think I said this a handful of times, but I also saw a little clip with Damien Searles, the translator, who mentions like it's all one sentence, yes, but it's not that there's not discrete units that could be sentences within the single sentence. There are lots of sentences in here. They're just demarcated by commas or ands or I thinks or other ways of just like not letting you have that pause, even though the chunk itself is a complete and like parsable sentence. And that chunk isn't like, every 7 pages or whatever. It's like about the amount of normal times a page, maybe even more, that you would have a period. And I think that's a remarkable thing in the way that it has been specifically constructed in Septology, even though it sounds hella annoying. And maybe part of it is because it sounds hella annoying that I was interested enough to jump into it. And then from there, it's just the construction of the thing that means, yeah, this is this is worth having done, um, and it's worth having read. And I even think it might be worth keeping around to come back to, which is a thing I never feel about novels. um, because why keep it around? Because I'll, it's a book. I'll be able to find it again eventually if I like need to. Um, yeah, I think that's sort of the largest portions of the thing that I wanted to talk about. I was going to take notes, and then I was just like, I don't need to take notes. I took one note, which is the chunk that I want to read because I think it gets into a lot of things, and maybe that's the way to sort of get into the rest of sort of the specifics of the book that I want to talk about. But yeah, I was half convinced when I said out loud that it's on par with Proust that I was going to just immediately recant that claim, but I don't. For now at least, I think it's genuinely one of the most powerful aesthetic experiences I've ever had, regardless of medium, and that's fucking wild. It is fucking some Nobel Prize winner. Um, okay, I'm gonna be reading for a couple minutes, I think. So let's just jump in the middle of the sentence, as it were. Get it, get it, get it. Um, maybe I'll just drive back to Bergen next Saturday, or next. Maybe I'll just drive back to Bergen next Sunday to go to morning mass. I haven't been to mass in a long time, so it'd be good to take communion. And then I can go see Asla, I think, and I see him sitting there on the sofa, and he's shaking and shaking. Doesn't he need to go walk his dog now? I think, and I see Bragi lying there by the hall door waiting to be let out. And I see Bragi get up and pad over to the sofa, and then jump up on the sofa and lie in Asla's lap, and then he's just lying there, and the dog is shaking too, and Asla can't move, can't even lift his hand, can't say a word. Just to say one single word feels like too much for him. It's as though he'd have to force himself to do it, he thinks. But now, yes, now for some reason his thoughts aren't so fixed anymore. They're not going around and around in the same circle now. Not anymore. His thoughts have begun to calm down now that the dog has come and lay in his lap, he thinks. Good dog, Asla says. Good boy, Bragi, good boy, he says. And Asla strokes Bragi's fur with his shaking hand and kneads his fur. And Asla thinks, how can he have thought about going into the sea? Because who would take care of the dog? And there's no way he could decide to leave the dog, Asla thinks. And now he's shaking less, but he's still shaking, his body trembling. I think his body is trembling, I think, and no, I don't want to think about Asla anymore. I don't want to see him before my eyes anymore, his long gray hair, his gray stubble. I don't want to think about him anymore. There's no point in thinking about him because he's just one person among many like that. He's alone. He's one of the many solitary people. He's just one artist among many, one painter among many, just one of the many painters almost no one knows about except some close family members and a few friends from school days and maybe a few fellow artists. He's one of thousands. No, I don't want to think about him anymore, I think. I need a sip of water, I'm realizing. Thank you. And then I think again that I should have dropped by to see him alone as he is, falling apart as he is. I should have dropped by and asked him to come and get a drink with me. Yes, he could have a pint of beer with a glass of something stronger, and I could have a cup of coffee with milk since I don't drink beer anymore. No beer or wine or anything stronger since I stopped drinking. That's what I should have done, because if Esla had something to drink, it would be easier for him. He'd stop shaking, and then he'd calm back down. Just getting something to drink would make things easier. The stone would get lighter. Yes, his stone might shift off him a little bit so that he could get a little light and a little air. I should have taken him with me someplace where there are other people, where other people are having drinks, where people are together, comforting their souls. That's what I should have done. I shouldn't have just driven past his building. I should have stopped and then taken him with me out into life. Yes, so he could live a little, yes, but instead I kept driving north like I wasn't worried about him, like I was in such a hurry to get away from him. Because I couldn't do it. I couldn't see Esla lying there, I think, and so I just kept driving past the building in Sailor's Cove where his apartment is, as if Esla was too hard, as if his pain or his suffering, maybe that's the better word, made me want to keep driving. Not because I didn't want to see him or spend time with him, but because, no, I don't know, but I wanted to get away. And maybe I thought I could drag his pain with me in a way, pull it behind me, that I could pull his suffering off of him and away from him if I kept driving. Anyway, that's an excuse I can think of now for not having stopped and visited his apartment, but instead having just kept driving. Because why didn't I go see him? Was it because I was scared to, not prepared to share his pain with him, share his suffering? But what do I mean by that? That's just a manner of speaking. Share his pain, share his suffering. It's a manner of speaking, as if you could share someone's pain or suffering, I think. And I see myself sitting there in the car, and I'm looking out the window, and looking at the playground down below the turnoff. There are no children in it, but yes, there's a young woman with long black hair sitting on the swing, and there on a bench next to the swing is a young man. He has medium-length brown hair. He's in a black coat, wearing a scarf. It's late in afternoon or early evening, and he sits there and looks at the woman sitting on the swing. And there's a brown leather bag hanging over his shoulder, and she's staring straight ahead. It's autumn, some leaves have already started changing color. This is the best time of year, the most beautiful, I think, and maybe most beautiful of all in the evening when the light is right at the point of disappearing, when some darkness has entered the light, but it's still light enough to see clearly that some of the leaves have lost their green color. I think this is my time of year. It always has been. For as long as I can remember, autumn has been my favorite, I think, and I look at the young man sitting on the bench, not moving, and staring straight ahead as if not seeing anything, and I look at the young woman sitting on the swing. She too is staring straight ahead, as if at nothing. And why are they sitting so still? Why aren't they moving? I think he on the bench, she on the swing, both just sitting there. Why are they just sitting there? Why aren't they talking to each other? Why are they completely still, motionless, like a picture, I think? Yes, they're exactly like a picture. A picture I might paint, I think. ... So yeah, I think that's some specifics. I think the depictions of alcoholism and delirium tremens in this book are heart-wrenching. The way they go is rough. The sort of brief descriptions we get, especially early on, of the namesake, or the Asla who is not converted to Catholicism, the way he reacts to his shakes feels extremely true to me as someone who has been around addicts for much of my life. He is largely just insistent that, like, no, just like, I don't need to go anywhere, I don't need to see anyone. No, it's fine that I collapse. Like, I don't remember collapsing onto the ground, like onto the snowy ground, and getting covered in snow and almost dying of frostbite. But if you just get me a drink, I'll stop shaking and I'll be better. And I just need a drink. Could you give me the shit? And then Asla feeds Asla the shot, and then their Asla says, well, I think I can get the other shot down too. Like, it's it doesn't feel moralizing in any way. It just feels like a really heart-wrenching description of addiction. And I think the thing that doesn't really come up here, we got to the end there of what I read. The picture comes in. I think there's also a lot of like really wonderful descriptions of painting. I think it's very well done in that regard. But then I think the big thing I wanted to read from here are the two sort of perspective shifts that happen, right? The way Asla can be thinking, and then all of a sudden, despite being in a car driving north, is also in Asla's room with Asla and Bragi. And it's a completely natural scene, no transition. That, like, you could equally read as something in Asla's mind's eye, or as just a sort of narrative slippage. And I think both are productive ways of reading. This is a first-person novel, right? But, like, it pushes the sense that there are these deeper connections, right? This is the sort of on the, like, surface level undergrad paper like level, right? This is the are Asla and Asla actually different people, or is is it split timeline, or like, is he just imagining this other man who like didn't quit drinking or whatever? Like, it's like, on a surface level, it's paper fodder, right? It's like, do a little thought experiment. It's paper fodder because it's a useful thing to do to like instill ways of critically reading things or engaging with different schools of thought around how to critically engage with literature, or to deploy aesthetic moves. But on the deeper level, I think there is as an unresolved ambiguity that I think is much more fascinating than any tension there. That like, this is a first person novel that can just shift off, and it doesn't just shift off to Asla, right? We're going to get more of this in the next few pages that I'm not going to read, because if I start reading more, I might not stop. I already read like 4 lines more than I intended to. The young man and the young woman are like pretty clear, like they're pretty clearly a younger Asla and Elis, his dead wife, in like early moments of their courtship. And I think they only appear whenever he's passing that specific playground. But that gets complicated over the course of the 7 novels as they appear, or even just when he's at home and he just thinks about having seen that scene. And it all wraps together so tightly, even though it's, what is it, 700 pages? 670 pages of a man circling the drain on his own thoughts over and over and over again. But again, I feel like any description of this book makes it sound like it's a thing that effectively it is the opposite of the overwhelming rhythm. And again, this is why I think it is justified in being a single sentence, because like you couldn't get there, I don't think, without this need for these constant interjections of things like yes, yes, or I think, or and those have a different rhythm, and he deploys them all in such specific ways that like, I mean, I couldn't can point you to every single one. I'm not trying to quantify this, but the flow of the thing is so special to me, and then the fact that it is deeply concerned with questions of humanity and addiction and art and aesthetics, and people, like, kick my ass. I love this book. It's great. Septology by Jon Fosse. Fucking, I don't know. Probably don't read it. It's fine. I don't know. It's a Just B's book club, so if you've got B brain, you should read it, I guess. But that's, Thanks for not watching.